Name brings up images, right? Big, fast, Japanese, 6 cylinders in a straight line, rear-wheel drive. Boost. Boost. And again, boost. Everybody thinks Supra, they think Fast and the Furious. Now the Supra in that movie, in those movies, plural, is not this Supra. This is an A70, this is a Mark III. The one everybody knows is the Mark IV. So no, this isn't the famous one, but it is a straight 6-powered Japanese highway tech missile with boost, a decent amount of power, a long wheelbase, and a big comfy cabin. And a lot of technology for the time. That's a pretty great thing in itself. Now, the shopping list here is the stuff of 90s and 80s exotics. That alloy-headed 6-cylinder has 2 cams and a single turbo. You could get it with a 5-speed manual. All turbo Supras came with a limited slip. Independent suspension all the way around. It's comfortable, it's fast, it's reliable. Now these days, most early Supras get overshadowed by the big dog car that everybody knows, the 90s behemoth with the giant rear wing on it. But they sold over 250,000 of these things, and for a very good reason. It's great. Great is relative, right? You have to think about what the car was designed to do. This is a 3,500-pound distance machine. It's also the first time that Toyota had given the Supra its own platform. Before this, Supras were built on Celica platforms. Celica was rear-wheel drive, the Supra was rear-wheel drive. Around the time this car was born, the Celica went front drive, so Toyota decided to give the Supra its own platform. And what they aimed for was a car that could eat miles like crazy. It's torquey, it's long-legged, it's comfortable, it has a big spacious cabin, and it does that better than many other things. It also pulls off the neat trick of feeling like it comes very much from a specific era. The interior seems unburstable. The exterior styling is tasteful, sporting, but restrained, and the car just seems to want to go along with whatever you ask of it. It's not going to dive into corners like a Lotus, and it's not going to eat up straights like a Mark IV, but what is here is a sense of composure and an adult idea of travel. We don't have a lot of purpose-built GT cars in this world anymore, largely because people stopped buying them. But that doesn't mean that they're not worth having. So in the American market, there are 2 basic types of A70. You can get the car without a turbocharger, or you can get it with a turbocharger. Debuted here in 1986, we got the Turbo 1 year later. It brought another 15% power, it dropped the 0 to 60 time, it made it a 145-mile-an-hour car. Now in period, people complained that these things were too heavy. They were not intended to be sports cars, they're distance cars. A Turbo weighs 3,600 pounds. It's not light, it's softly suspended, has a single turbo, has a bit of lag. They're pretty much all the same in this market if you're looking at stock cars. There are a handful of different options, but most of them left the dealer pretty well equipped. They all have a limited slip. You could get a manual gearbox or an automatic. A large percentage of them have Toyota's electronically adjustable suspension, which used a little servo motor on the top of each damper to vary damping stiffness by 3 levels. It's a very period piece. It works okay for what the car is designed for. A lot of people ditch it, but by and large, when you pick one of these, you're making a choice between, is it a clean car that's not been screwed with? Is it a turbo or not? Those 2 questions determine everything. And if you want a turbo, condition should be the #1 thing you chase. There is one weird thing to think about when you're looking at these things. Now, we didn't get that many variants of this car in this market. As the car aged, Toyota built more and more variants and found ways to stuff more and more engine into it, specifically for the Japanese market. Toward the end of its life, this car got the 1JZ 6-cylinder, which is a relative to the 2JZ that ended up in the Mark IV Supra that everybody loves. There are gray market cars that came in. There are motor swap cars that ended up here. Some American market cars have been motor swapped to a 1JZ or a 2JZ or pick your poison, right? The best answer for you, if you don't know what you want and you think you might want to go into those waters, find a specialist and let them guide you through it. Gray market cars and motor swap cars in particular are a minefield. It can work out very well, but you need to know what you're looking for, and you generally need to have somebody walking you through the process if you don't know what you're doing. Interiors, like a lot of Toyota products from the 80s and 90s, are relatively durable. Most of what you will see is the velour, that kind of Camry-like cloth that lasted for a long time in that company. It's pretty durable. The outer bolsters on the seats wear. Most of the plastics and the small bits on the inside are no longer available, so if you find a car that has a complete interior and it's in good shape, that's a point in its column. It's a reason to maybe take it home with you. You want to check that everything works. One thing to look out for, leaks are common. A lot of the rubber seals aren't available anymore. The Targas leak more than the regular coupes, but both of them have a habit of letting water inside. If you can, pull up the carpets on the sills, maybe behind the pedals, check to make sure there's no mildew, check there isn't any rust that's developed back there. So a lot of people think a 6-cylinder turbo Supra is a 6-cylinder turbo Supra. This is not the 2JZ that came in the Mark IV. It's a much different motor. It is the 7M GTE. It is a single turbo where the Mark IV was a twin sequential turbo. It's a durable motor. They didn't pack a lot of boost into it. It should run about 6 PSI at max boost, but there are a couple of things to watch out for. It doesn't like to be run low on oil. When you look at it, check and make sure that the previous owner kept it top to up. When they get low, the first thing they starve are the big end bearings. It's known for killing the bottom of the motor. You want to run a good quality oil in it and keep it full as often as you can. Oil leaks are not uncommon, particularly from the front cover, but also from the rear main seal. You can see this car has a little bit of a leak going on in front and in back. It's nothing to worry about, but it can be a little bit of a shocker if you're familiar with Toyota motors that are known for being pretty much airtight and bulletproof dry. These things aren't. They weep. It's relatively normal. Especially look down on the spark plug wells. The cam cover gaskets are known for leaking a little. The spark plug wells tend to fill up with oil. One more thing to look for when the engine's cold, pop off the turbo plumbing, the elbow on the side of the turbo, and work the quill up and down. If there's any measurable shaft wear, a tiny amount is okay, but they tend to wear in the shaft and the bearings. Means the turbo's getting old, means you might have to deal with it soon. So this motor is a timing belt motor, standard interval, about 60,000 miles. It's a non-interference motor, which means that when the timing belt breaks, the valves won't hit the pistons. You will be stuck by the side of the road, but your motor won't be junk. That doesn't mean you should ignore it. It's worth doing the timing belt at the intervals, just like every other timing belt car. Pay attention to it. Ask the previous owner when the belt was last done. When the cars were new, Toyota printed an incorrect torque spec for the head bolts, the bolts that hold the cylinder head to the block. It was too low. They were known for blowing head gaskets because of this. At this point, most of these cars had had modern head gaskets put in and had the head studs updated. A lot of people like to use ARP and the torque rating somewhere around 80 pound-feet. What matters is that it's been done and been done right. And again, at this point in history, most of these cars have had this taken care of, but you want to check and make sure that it's been done. You want to watch when the engine's cold. Exhaust leaks near the manifold are not uncommon. Rust means that the studs in the manifold can be a bit of a bear to get off. If the leak goes away when warm, it's probably from the manifold. Doesn't mean you're not going to have to deal with it, but it's worth taking a look at. As with any relatively early turbo production car, you also want to remember that when you're driving it, to pay a little bit more attention to it. There's even a sticker on the door panel that reminds you of this. Don't lean into it until the car's been warmed up, and if you've been running it hard, if you've been running uphill, if you've been running a lot of boost or at high speed for a long time, give it a couple of minutes once you park it to cool down while it's running before shutting it off. Just lets heat dissipate out of the turbo, lets the whole thing chill out. It's generally good for the motor. A70s came with one of two transmissions. There's a 4-speed automatic and there's a 5-speed manual. Now, the 5-speed manual in particular is known for being pretty stout. Synchros tend to get a little tired, the gearbox can get a little notchy, and they will leak oil, but by and large, they don't blow up unless you hugely abuse them, and even then, they're known for being pretty durable. The automatics are also known for being durable. They have a neat sport button. Shifts should be quick. It should be more aggressive. It should snap off shifts a little more cleanly. Most people end up actually liking the automatic with this motor because it's got a big, meaty chunk of torque in the middle. The automatic suits it. With the suspension, it's worth thinking about what's been done to the car, if anything. It's all relatively durable Toyota stuff. A-arms in front, multi-link in the back. The upper A-arms are forged aluminum to save weight. But these cars were cheap for a very long time, and a lot of them have been modded. Most of the mods that people apply to a Mark III don't necessarily suit the car's character. If you're looking at a car that has a lot of spring rate, a lot of damper, a lot of bar in it, maybe walk away. These are long-distance GT cars. They like to be plush and compliant. A lot of people have taken the factory adjustable suspension and replaced it which is fine. It's very much a period piece, but if they've swapped it out, you want to check and make sure that it's been swapped for something that suits your personality or even what you want to do with the car. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the stock setup if you use it as the people who designed it intended. As far as rust goes, these things tend to be either pretty clean or not, depending on how they were abused. A lot of them were abused and got big mileage. You want to look for rust in the frame rails, in the sill crimps on the edges, in the backs of the rear wheel arches where mud packs in, spare tire well, the floors, pretty much anywhere that a period Toyota can rust, it will rust. It'll be a good indication of the kind of care the car got. One that's been well taken care of won't have a lot on it.
The Mark III Supra was once a bargain, with values for a number 2 excellent condition model hovering between $8,500 and $10,000 from 2006 to 2012. Then prices began to gently climb, reaching around $11,000 in 2013 and $17,000 by mid-2018. As of mid-2020, values for a car in that same number 2 condition seem to have settled at around $28,000. This video review is intended to give an overview of what it's like to buy a Mark III Toyota Supra Turbo, but keep in mind that values change over time. For even more details and up-to-date information, please click the link below for our full written buyer's guide on Hagerty.com.
It also pulls off the neat trick of feeling like it comes very much from a specific era. The exterior styling is tasteful, sporting, but restrained, and the car just seems to want to go along with whatever you ask of it. It's not going to dive into corners like a Lotus, and it's not going to eat up straights like a Mark IV. This is a car for grown-ups, and there's something very satisfying about that.